Hey, everybody, this is Dr. David Perrodin going live here for Safety Doc Podcast. Let me check a few things here. This is actually an impromptu Safety Doc podcast. I have to adjust some lighting. Not really set up down here for this, but in the North Star recording studio. But we have some very important developing information that we're going to address tonight. So first of all, Jim, Nick, hey, can you guys hear me okay? Can you make a post over in the chat if I'm coming through okay? All right. I think I'm going to temporarily move my arm down. There we go. Good. Audio is fine. Great. I appreciate that. Good. Okay. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Jim. All right. I'm coming through visually. Okay. Got the old spotlight on here. So. Right, folks. So just bear with me for a moment as I take care of a few settings here, but be well worth your time. All right. It's been a foggy day, by the way, here in Wisconsin. So 43 degrees. All right. Yeah, Jim, thanks. So, yeah, 43 degrees, very foggy today in Wisconsin, which is unusual. But all right, what I'm doing is just getting a final tweet out right here. And all right. Good. Okay, folks. So what I'm going to do is respond to you in the chat room. And then I've also got, I have some emails that came in that I needed to respond. So I'll respond to during this. So obviously why we're here tonight is we have a rapidly developing, very much unprecedented situation with the coronavirus. And I want you to know, so my credentials as a retired school administrator, as somebody who teaches aspiring principals, directors of special education, as somebody who has worked with and in emergency management, there are things which are happening right now that to me are unprecedented. And I don't like to do what's called projected benchmarking or look at kind of one disaster, I guess, to another. But I'm going to do that today, right at the start here, and kind of look at how some things unfolded on 9/11 in lower Manhattan versus how things are unfolding right now with the coronavirus, because there are significantly different responses, different ways that decisions are being made, different ways that communication is going out, which right now are much antiquated. I mean, it's not nearly as smooth as it was on 9/11. And this is an area that I had studied in my book, School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America. I work with the Department of Planning in New York. So this is something that's in my wheelhouse. I know about this. But let's talk about where we're at right now. So we are seeing decisions made specifically in education, K-12 settings and post-secondary at a rapid, unprecedented pace. When I did my podcast on March 3rd, when I was a guest on the Mallard Report with Jim Mallard, Mallia, rd.com, the Mallory report, I was talking about how I thought things would play out in the K through 12 setting. And actually, a lot of that has happened. How schools would close, how one school would cause another to close, and so forth. But we're at a point now, I wasn't looking at post-secondary during that presentation. And actually, I did a podcast on March 9th. I wasn't looking at post-secondary, but I instruct in post-secondary. And what is happening now is completely, again, unprecedented. Universities shutting down and saying we're going to go to an online format. Students need to get out of their dorms. And Nick, I know you're following this right now. This is absolutely crazy for these types of announcements to come out with these very short time frames. And there are, no input from the end users. It's kind of very minimal attempts to support people who are put into very precarious positions. So again, we have decisions being made. If we back up in 72 hours, decisions being made at paces which I have never seen before. So what's driving this? Well, I think it's obviously fear driven. And we also just do not have clear, steady communication and also redundant communication. So when 9/11 happened, okay, September 11, 2001, in New York City, in Lower Manhattan, obviously the financial district, 500,000 people were evacuated safely off of Lower Manhattan in 9 hours. And there's a few reasons that happened. One is we have very clear communication. What was happening, that the buildings had been attacked, where people needed to go. And then every hour, there would be a repeat of what had just happened. So people who are tuning in, they could immediately get up to speed. So, and back then, remember, we had flip phones, and at the best, we were texting each other. And you're probably, watching this, there was no mobile device. You're sitting in front of a TV or sitting in front of a computer doing refresh. But there was something at work back then, and I wrote about it in my book, called the transference dynamic. So the transference dynamic, and this is interesting because right now we're seeing the transference dynamic play out. The transference dynamic basically means, in a nutshell, how we were raised. Okay, when we were raised, what fears we had that kind of dictate our decision making later on. So here's an example. So on 9/11, most of the people who were evacuated on 9/11 were in their early 40s. So they had participated, or they were alive during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, during the time of the Cold War with Russia. So there was always this external enemy, and there was always this thought that the government would step in and help you in a time of crisis. So when the towers were attacked, people kind of went into this mode of transference dynamic, believing that there would be this rescue, and these boats that just showed up because Admiral Loy of the Coast Guard gave a command: anybody with a boat, show up and rescue people off of Lower Manhattan. And people figured it out, right? They worked the problem, but it was this transference dynamic, because the reason people weren't climbing over everybody and fighting everybody along Battery Park trying to get onto boats. It was very orderly because people already had this in their mind from when they were young, that if we get attacked, the government will respond and help us, right? That's how we have been inculcated. Now, what's happening right now, and we look at especially the younger generation, they haven't been through that, right? We had the Cold War has been over for 20 years. Enemies are very nebulous. I mean, we've had terrorism, and an enemy like a pandemic, a virus. I mean, you can't objectify it, right? So we don't have this transference dynamic at work. And this just amplifies people's panic kind of through the roof right now. So that's something much different than what we saw on 9/11, 2001 in Lower Manhattan. What was interesting then is we also had this kind of temporary autonomous zone, or TAZ, that formed for 9 hours. And people just did what they need to do. Boats would kind of move in, move out to get people off of Lower Manhattan successfully, right, in 9 hours. We don't have any type of temporary autonomous zones coming together now. I mean, there isn't any group that's coming together to help people in a certain area. It's very fragmented. If anything, people are being told to isolate. So it's a very different feel than 9/11. 9/11. We also had a relatively quick bounce back of the supply chain after 9/11, and I don't think that's the case happening right now. But let's go back to communication, right? So 20 years ago, 9/11, 19 years ago, but um, we had much better communication. It was clear from the federal government what was happening, state government, local levels of what was happening. And the part that people forget with 9/11 is that as this rescue is going on of 500,000 people from lower Manhattan, they still believe this is an active event. Okay. They don't believe that this is over. They believe that there's going to be another wave of planes, or that the harbor is mined, or what else is going to happen. So in that regard, it's similar to what we're going through right now. Nobody is thinking that this is a completed event. If anything, it's being portrayed that this is just the beginning of something which is going to grow with magnitudes. But if we go back actually to 9/11, when people are being rescued from the harbor after the Twin Towers have been attacked, in that moment, people thought that that was the onset of something which was going to be significantly greater and might play out over weeks, if not months. I mean, that we could possibly be in line for an attack. So those regards, again, were kind of similar, but it's very strange, very awkward right now that we don't have clear communication from a federal level or from a state level. Counties, it's very, very choppy. It's not coordinated at all. We don't have a jump in from, for example, FEMA, National Guard. I think that's all preparing to happen, but this is again, it's very unusual, because usually people would get together, the federal government, state level, and they would have a clear message. They would have a clear place that message would be released, and you'd be able then to go back and reference it. And that just isn't the case. And we don't even have clear communication right now on exactly how is this virus spreading, right? We don't even have a very distinct, panel discussion, for example, on that. So in my book, School of Errors, and not promoting the book during this at all, but I talked about something called the social contract. And we have right now something is playing out right now in this moment of social contract, meaning that we have government taking more and more control of whether it be attending events, whether it be flights, commerce, things like that. And then the question is, how much of that is restored when this event is actually done? After 9/11, the social contract significantly changed. I mean, with what we were giving up for quote unquote for safety and security, that was an exchange for having our emails being accessed, phone calls, things like that. Not to go conspiracy theory here, but definitely we know after 9/11, I mean, just look at our plane tickets. We now have additional ways that we have given up some of our protected rights. So here's what is likely going to happen for schools. So we've seen the university settings close and say they're going to go online. And of course, they're saying we have formats to do that, like we have online formats. And that's true. Most universities already offer, every face-to-face class has an online component. So, but it's a massive amount of work to take a class this state. I mean, midstream, I teach at the university level, to take a class and to move it up. So yeah, okay. So Nick in the chat, Nick Schulander, our good friend, in the chat had said, funny, you should bring that up, Doc. The governor here in Washington just placed a ban on events with more than 250 attendees. So yeah, so Nick, this is that whole social contract. And what's the science of saying this will do any good, right? Where did that number 250 come from versus, 1,000 versus what if it's 250 attendees and they're spread out in an outdoor setting? I mean, this is just insane that all of these arbitrary figures are being put together. So, and how do you enforce this? Okay, how do you enforce this? So what we also need to be aware of is let's say that any of us get identified and we are put under a quarantine, maybe a self-quarantine, right, for 14 days, and you're told to go out with protective gear. So, what if you venture out in society, right? You go out and you do something and you don't have your protective gear on. What is that going to look like, not only from an ethical standpoint of possibly infecting others, but people, it's easy. The government knows where you're at with your phone. They know where you're at with your vehicle and your GPS tracking. They have surveillance camera. They can see you didn't have the protective devices on. You could be open to civil lawsuits. We're going to see a ton of that when all of this is done, right? So we're going to have this whole voluntary quarantine thing. That's not going to work, and that's going to have to be moved to a mandatory quarantine. And again, if people think that they're going to be able to work around that, that just simply won't be the case. And I would say that this is going to be upon us within the next, maybe 72 hours. We're going to start seeing this implementation. I know this is kind of crazy to talk about, but I talked 72 hours ago about things that I thought would have played out over weeks, and now they played out literally over just a handful of days. But again, this whole thing of voluntary. So Sean, thank you for your question in the chat, and thank you for keeping the chat lively. Does this include businesses such as Walmart and Costco? Yeah, I think absolutely, right? Because the other part of this is their legal firms will be telling them if you have gathering sites. I mean, you're going to have these weird conflicts, which will suddenly come into place right now. The state is saying you can't gather more than 250 people. Well, you probably have that many people or more in a Walmart at any time. So I think you're going to see this limiting of people in and out. And realistically, I mean, what type of, are you going to screen people as they come in and out? Are you going to do orders where people are going to pick things up? And then who's going to be working at Walmart and Costco and not calling in sick, right? Who's going to continue these jobs, these essential jobs? I mean, right now at this moment, fire departments all across the country and police departments are meeting to say, what do we do if we have, 50% of our people unavailable in the next 72 hours because schools have been canceled, they need to stay home with their kids, or they've been assigned to essential areas, like they're, whether it be, police departments and into more high priority, areas where they have to patrol, or if they're just responding to, emergency calls of medical or accidents, and everything else kind of gets pushed into secondary. I can tell you there's meetings happening right now at this moment in large counties across the country, meetings that started just about an hour ago. And what they're doing is determining what their essential services are. Meaning, we have to keep the water tower running. We have to keep police and fire going in our EMS. And that's where the priorities are going to be, as some of these secondary services are just going to be gone. Are we going to have the DMV open? I highly doubt it, right? I believe we're going to have this list coming out in a very short amount of time. So let's see, Nick, what do you think makes this more serious than the other outbreaks? So here's the thing. I don't necessarily, but it's hard to look at this and just from the numbers say that this is more serious. I don't want to say that it's not serious, but if we look at tuberculosis in India every year, and if we look at how MRSA was in 2014, and the fact that we really had no way to get a handle on that. But so you talked about Zika or Ebola. Yeah, this is similar, right? It's similar in those themes. But what I think is different right here, obviously, is the way that people are making. Well, one is the way that they're testing for it. I mean, we weren't testing for Zika or Ebola in where I'm at, Wisconsin. But this is a media narrative. It's also a government narrative. So I don't really understand that. That's where we have to come together and we ask kind of what is happening behind the scenes with what is happening right now. And not, again, I don't want to go down this conspiracy road, but this is, again, it's so unprecedented. And let's just take a look at the universities. So if the universities where students, okay, if you're in that 18 to 25-year-old range, your likelihood of having serious complications from the virus are very small, right? Very small. But the reality is, think about it from a university perspective. So they could either, I guess, why wouldn't a university say, we're going to, keep these dorms, keep housing available to you, because then we can get resources to you. So it's really strange on that part, because universities are completely out of sync with K-12, right? If a university is saying you have to go online and you can't be coming to school here, but yet in that school district where that university is, in Massachusetts and Boston and all of that for Harvard, wouldn't it totally make sense then for everything to shut down K-16? Why would K-12, why would you still have K-12 if you've just shut down a lot of your post-secondary? So part of this is, I believe universities are very aware that they don't want to have the liability of having to care for people who are in university housing. And I don't want to make that sound cold but I mean, I think this is something that is being considered of universities looking at this and saying, what if we do have a dorm that we have to put under isolation, and now our university, becomes a site of quarantine. The other part is, we don't know with a FEMA response, and you look in FEMA plans at county levels, we don't know if some of these universities are already being identified as FEMA locations for emergency response, or if we're looking at if they're going to stage assets at some of these university sites. Because once hospitals fill up, folks, it's either universities or K-12, and it's mostly going to be K-12 settings, which would be identified as FEMA locations. The National Guard would come in and take over those locations. I've been through that actually once, and that was with a flood. But let me check the chat here. Nick, you wrote, in other words, why didn't we have quarantines or school shutdowns when those things were going around, Zika and Ebola? Yeah, absolutely. We didn't. It was, nobody even talked about that, or even, where this was very, the hot spots. What was it? Texas and Florida. So you're asking the right question. Why is the narrative different today? What has so significantly changed today? And even, again, if we just look at where Zika was in parts of Texas and parts of Florida, we didn't have this ramp up of what is happening right now. So, Sean, you wrote H1N1 was one of the larger outbreaks I dealt with as a respiratory therapist. So yeah, respiratory therapist. I was a speech language pathologist, so I worked closely with OT, PT, and respiratory therapists. So yeah, H1N1 being, a significant viral event, which impacted, lungs, and we didn't have this type of response to that. And actually, I mean, Sean, if you wanted to share more with that, but so it's this whole part of one, just stopping and saying, why are things happening as fast as they're happening? Okay, why are these decisions happening as fast as they're happening? And the second one is, we are completely out of alignment with K through 16, meaning your K-12 schools and K through 16. So it's kind of what is happening right now at the college level, that completely will be replicated in the K-12 setting within the next 72 hours. Now, what schools will say is, we're not going to reconvene. We don't know when we're going to reconvene school. Like we'll go into we'll close school down, we'll go into online again. And that is much harder at a K-12 level than people imagine. I teach face-to-face, I teach online. Online is much more time intensive. You have to remember, teachers don't at K-12 have this developed. Imagine, second grade, fifth grade, just trying to put this online. That's going to be really frantic. People are going to be, school districts will be taking guidance from their states and from the Fed, and it's largely going to probably be some kind of Khan Academy type of thing. There are programs already out there for migrant students. Some of those can be accessed in basically modules. If you look at how FEMA does their education, there are different FEMA courses. They're about 2 to 3 hours long in their modules. Now, those aren't for students, but I think what you're going to see is something similar to that, they'll be opened up to K-12, and then students will be able to participate in that. So, when we hear, we're not going to have a definite return date, what you're basically hearing at this point, because it's March 11th, is you're not coming back to school this year, right? That's really unlikely that that's going to happen. And if you told people that right now, I think the panic would rocket, right? So it's easier to say, well, we're going to close school and then we're going to reevaluate in a week or two. But what would change in a week or two that would make you comfortable to open up schools again, knowing at least what we've been told is a longer incubation phase right now with the coronavirus? And also the fact of, sanitizing, because every time a kid comes in and out and people come in and out, and what's being transported, through the products that we're buying that are coming on trucks and shipments, if the coronavirus can stay alive on hard surfaces, like containers and things like that, for a long amount of time. And, who knows how long on fabrics. I mean, those are the things that really should be like overtly stated. We should have that. And the fact too, that we haven't had this ramp up in cleaning supplies, sanitizer, and all of that, that's the kind of stuff that should be getting dropped off everywhere. We should have a FEMA National Guard response with that. And that should be everywhere, right? I mean, it would be similar as we would expect after a hurricane has hit. So I worked closely with Cajun Navy Relief, Katie Pashon, talking about how the rescues worked. I had the podcasts when the Bahamas got hit, with rescuers who were on the scene down there. And it took a while, to get water and things like that on the scene, but it's pretty rapid. And here we can't get hand sanitizer that has been stored somewhere. It's not being brought in. I'm going to stores today. The stuff's not there. And it's not that it's been in stock and it's gone. It hasn't been in stock since last week. So there's something very peculiar with this. There's no way that we wouldn't be able to scale production and get these things out, or essentially out and say, you're limited to one a person. I mean, my God, in my town, when it's winter, they put sand at the end of every road in a big bucket that you can haul up and sand your driveway. It's that type of stuff. It should be actually delivered by the post office, right? It should be delivered by the post office. Imagine, I mean, wouldn't it make sense that a small bottle of Perel hand sanitizer gets loaded on, with every postal vehicle, and it gets put in your mailbox? Maybe that's done once a week for the next 10 weeks. I mean, these are things that actually come out of thoughtful, probably federal or state or even local level government. That's not happening now. And I just don't believe that it's happening because it's disorganized. I believe there's more happening. Hey, Kat, thanks for joining in. I appreciate it. Let me go back to the chat. Jim, listen to the money talk. The thing that's really strange right now, stock market continues to go down, right? The 10-year treasury, which was almost at 3% less than a year ago, is at about 0.7, 0.6%, which is ridiculously low. I mean, unbelievably low. We have no safe haven for money. If we also have an emergency declaration, we're going to see really how strong FDIC is. Or we're going to have some suspension of FDIC. I've received information already from my banks, some of my primary banks, within the last 2 hours, detailing out how banks might have limited access not only to banking services, but banking funds. So these are things which are going to rapidly develop. So Jim, you were saying, so look at where the money is. Yeah, but again, I agree with you fully. The money is weird though, because the companies that we thought would be profiting from this, that are making the Lysol wipes and the sanitizers and some of those types of things, and more staples, right? Things that we have to live on, oatmeal, utilities, things like that. Those stocks aren't doing any better. And at one point, gold was even going down, which was counterproductive because gold usually goes up during a time of crisis. So again, what this is saying is I believe there's some substantial external manipulation going on here with the markets, which is, just to be aware of. There's nothing for any of us right now. There's nothing for any of us. We could be notified tomorrow morning that every 401k that you have, every 403b that you have, everything that you have in a government held account, including your bank, your savings and loan down the road, could be froze. It could be froze for 30 days. They could say there's no transactions because, if people start, you could have run on banks. That's not out of the realm that we could actually have run on banks. So let me catch up here. Sean G, Chasing the Truth. Hey, Sean, thanks. Shipyards are almost vacant from what I'm reading from Seattle. Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. Port of Baltimore, largely empty. Some of the other significant ports, I'm hearing this firsthand from people in those areas that these ports are empty. So again, we are not having things come in. It's one thing, when it is the plastic toys which are on the aisle at Walmart. It's a whole other thing, when it is not only medications but other vital things that we count on for everyday life. So there's definitely going to be an exhausting of the supply chain of any built up inventory, which typically it exists for a period of time, and then we're going to see, without a doubt, we will see shelves at Costco and Walmart and just our everyday stores become thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner because these items will not be coming in. There's also so much more demand for the critical items right now. Again, paper towels, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, things like that. So I'm not an alarmist. I'm not a panic type of guy. You probably, if you follow me, you know that. I've actually never gone live with the show before. I needed to do it tonight because I need to talk through some of this. I need to figure out what you're experiencing, what you're pulling out of this, because I've never seen this before. I'm 48. I remember when the Twin Towers were hit. I remember coming home that night and there were lines for gas, and they would give people like 2 gallons, and then that was it. And eventually gas was out and people were clearing off the shelves. And I remember the bounce back from that. And it was just a different feel. We had different communication. It's not that way right now. Let me go back to the chat. Nick, how should we respond to chaos uncertainty? Easy, you stick to the plan, and for God's sake, don't give people any discretion, right, Doc? Yeah. So Nick, the thing is, one is, you stick to the plan, and I think you have to know right now that what your options are and make your own decisions, right? Not looking forward to somebody up above who is all right. Okay, here we go. One thing is, I don't think you can look external for people to give you guidance. Now, of course, things, wash your hands and limit, but this is the time you really have to understand what your priorities are. Your priorities, your family, your immediate family, the resources that you have, because again, we are this is unprecedented. This type of disruption in our currency and our supply lines, and then these decisions to completely, shut down universities, and soon it will be K-12. So keeping those decisions, and then also, as Nick had pointed out, using your discretion, your gut instinct, your discretion on what to do. Okay, and again, knowing who is around you, kind of looking out for immediate family. I'm not saying hoard a lot of things, but it does make sense, to keep supplies and to keep, checking in with people. So chintz, will spring change things? I have heard that the warmer air and moisture is detrimental to the virus. So I've actually heard that too. Now, I can't say from a medical standpoint, an epidemiology standpoint, that that's accurate, but that is congruent with what I've heard. Also, the fact that, we'll just be able to get windows open. If we go back and look at how like tuberculosis and other contagious types of diseases, highly contagious, were treated, open air was a treatment which was more effective than when people were confined. We objectively know that. So for this to happen right now in the United States is better than this to happen in November, when a large part of the country is going indoors and shutting down. So we do have that. And Nick Schulander, Johnson having field day right now. Yeah. The thing is, the stocks aren't showing that though. So this is where it starts to get really strange, because you would think that stocks that have a vested interest in, whether it be Lysol wipes and products, or even a cure or a vaccine, I guess, or things like that, that those will be going through the roof, right? And that's just not the case. We have this overall widespread, massive decline in the Dow, S&P, and Russell, NASDAQ, which is it's really unusual to see that. You'd see that you'd have some perennial winners that might come out of this. But I think part of it too is, we've had this political statement of saying, should we, if a vaccine is created, it would be made available to everybody for free. Well, then what's the incentive to make a vaccine? I'm not saying that we shouldn't make a vaccine, right? But it's almost like you'd want to come out and have almost this race to the moon of saying, the first vaccine, is going to get, whatever, $1 billion or something like that. But then I guess people would say, well, then you're going to have people creating illnesses to create these vaccines. But we have to realize, and also priorities. I mean, why haven't we had and identified, here are 3 companies, and have them up in a panel testifying before the Senate, right? We have people testifying because if there's a school shooting, they're having Dee Snider or Snyder from Twisted Sister testify that rock and roll music is not causing school shootings. Why aren't we having emergency testimony right now with the epidemiologists in these organizations, along with the CDC, of saying, here's how we're doing this. This is how we're laying this out. We're not having that, though. We are not having that. So what's not being told to us, I think, conveys so much louder than what is being told to us. Gallant gallstone. I'm sure that Mallard was beating some serious ass down at the Costco to secure toilet paper for his ducklings. Jim thinks ahead. So let's look. Azuko Langley. I have a ton of toilet paper. I bought it on sale cheap at CVS before the Bugaloo kicked off. Smart thing. If you have things that you're going to use up, obviously it makes sense to stock those things. I think where we're at right now, things have been replenished. I think we're going to get to a point, though, where we're not going to have replenishment of things in our stores, because again, we're not going to have people. I mean, if we have quarantines that are imposed, you're not going to have truck drivers going across certain areas. You're going to have staging of assets or certain things that are coming in, whether it be toilet paper, food, water, medicine, soup cans, whatever, and then those will be distributed. This is all very real on the table right now. Should I buy or sell stocks? Zuko saw. Yeah, I can't do that. I can't give advice on that. But I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. I expect there's so much uncertainty in the market. I don't know what's going to turn the market around, right? What at an international level, what news right now is going to turn the market around, other than somebody saying, we found a vaccine for this and we can mass produce this and have it out like in whatever number of weeks. So I guess I'm looking, and I don't know what would be an impetus to kind of turn this around. Let's see. Sean, Chasing the Truth. Trump is doing a national address at 9 from the Oval Office. Yep, I'm aware of that. So thanks, Zuko. Too late. I sold them all and bought cans of beans. Okay, maybe not a bad thing, right? Paranormal Heart. I heard on the news today that places in Italy have closed business and schools. Do you think this could happen in the U.S. and Canada? If so, what would you suggest to people to prepare? So I fully expect that schools will close. I fully expect that through K-12. And I think the first will be preschools. That'll be very rapid to shut down preschools because a lot of those are community-based. So it's much harder to invoke a standard. All those sites are different. I mean, so when we think about schools, we have to think about brick and mortar schools that we kind of have in our mind. These community-based preschools, hundreds of thousands of those throughout the country. Online schools, kids going partly online, partly in the school building, portable buildings, stuff like this. So I think parents need to be prepared, right? Of what happens if my kids don't have school? What if we get a notification and school's done for the rest of the year and it's going to be online in whatever format that is? How are we going to care for them? Are we going to be able to work with relatives so the relatives might be able to watch them if we're splitting some time between here and the office? The thing is, folks, I think we would have had time to deal with this if it would have been clearly communicated and laid out in front of us. There's nobody 1 week ago that thought literally all of these post-secondary institutions, and Nick, you can say all of these would shut down, right? Harvard would be shut down. Washington State would be shut down. Stanford, University of Wisconsin-Madison, that these are all shutting down. The NCAA holding their Final Four, their 64-team tournament without anybody in the stands. The NBA are playing their first game without anybody in the stands. These are things nobody saw coming. And this is a fact that things are rolling out at such a speed, right? We can't, I mean, it's like driving down the highway right now at 200 miles an hour in the dark with one headlight. That's what it's like. You just say, whoa, that happened. Whoa, that happened. Like nobody knows. And if we had some indication of where things were going, I think it would be obviously much, we can handle that. But when these things are happening out of the blue, when things are happening today, like the rodeo in Houston, Texas, which had several thousand people, if not tens of thousands of people attend, and they got there and they literally shut it down right then. All right. Please do not, or it's nice seeing you live, David. Please do it more. Oh, okay. Thanks, Kat. I thought you said, please don't move as much. I'm kind of animated right now. So yeah, in Houston, Texas today, people showed up for a large rodeo. And when they got there, they shut it down. So communication is a big problem. Who shut it down? They didn't have any plans. Some people still went in, then they had to tell them they had to leave. So that's a rodeo. Now, what if it is, people going to a hospital and they say, we're full, we can't get you in. I have people telling me that right now, that they, in large cities, that they cannot get into hospitals. Okay. So let me take a pause here. Paranormal or Gallant Gallstone. Too bad they don't make Big John's baked beans anymore. Could live for a year off of them. That awesomeness. Yeah. I mean, people who did canned goods. So the last time I really remember that happening was in 1999, when everybody thought the computers were going to crash for the year 2000. I had several friends who bought bags of rice and water and all kinds of things and stored them because we thought, everybody was saying the computers aren't designed for 2000. We're going to have this big lockup and the electrical grids will go down and things like that. So people, though people expected that. I mean, that's what they were being told by people who are computer engineers saying, I'm not sure, or software engineers, this could happen, but people dealt with it, right? They dealt with it. Right now, it's the unknown. I mean, it's the fact that we could wake up tomorrow and find the banking system to be froze across the world. You can be told your ATM that you might be able to withdraw $100 a day, that your kids are going to be home from school. Imagine internet access, especially for rural, but I mean, internet access is going to be going to a snail's pace because you're going to have so many more people logging in online. And you can only do so many things remote. I mean, you can't be a remote police officer. You can't be a remote firefighter or EMS. So these are the type of things which are going to place these unusual strains on our system that even in 9/11, when those strains were put on in lower Manhattan, for example, we got through it. We handled it. Okay, systems develop. Systems aren't developing right now. We don't have that. This is extremely different. So let me go back to the chat here. Azuko Langley, my vacuum cleaner has a wheel coming off, and I know I should replace it soon. Should I buy a vacuum now before the Chinese imports stop coming in? Yeah, I don't know. Well, there was a kid on the show with something like America's Got Talent or anything. Is if any of you saw it, this kid who was infatuated, this 8-year-old boy with old vacuum cleaners because they were all made out of metal and things like that. But no, I mean, I largely would expect, right? Any of us would expect that anything that's coming through imports, we know that our ports of Baltimore, San Diego, San Francisco, other ports are just, very sparse right now. We just don't have things coming in. Nick, I bet the school districts you work with are getting pitched for cleaning services. Yeah, let me talk about this. Nick, you're right on. And so the CD or the federal government came out, and I think it was also the FDA, but basically said, listen, there's nothing out there that is proven to kill coronavirus specifically. And they issued warnings just in the last few days to 7 companies. They didn't identify the companies. The federal government did, saying, knock it off, stop going to schools. What is happening around here right now? On the news, they're showing custodians wearing backpacks that they bought from some vendor, which are basically spraying out some disinfectant, which is ionized, right? So it sticks apparently to whatever you're doing. Now, most campuses are between 500,000 and 1,000,000 square feet, like a school campus. So this is just ridiculous. It's to think that you're going through and disinfecting everything, and then the kids come back in, and now everything is fine. That's not the issue, right? Because the kids themselves, the staff, might be the ones infected. The piece of mail that comes in, the box of food that comes in for your lunch, all right, might have virus on it because it was in a vehicle that had transported something else from somewhere else. So it's this really crazy thinking that really will do anything, right? That's going to be a remedy to this. You'd really have to shut the building down for whatever that incubation time was for the virus, just to sterilize the building, right? Just to sanitize the building. And then the other fact is, everybody, the moment they return to the building, hundreds of kids and people from all over the building, contamination happens again. So yeah, I've seen this. It's the first thing on the news. It's the first thing on the local news as they show the district, which has just spent tens of thousands of dollars on all of this stuff, which is not empirically proven. And it's customer perceived value, as our friend Nick Schulander in the chat has said, customer perceived value, customers believing that if you do this, it's going to make you safer. If we have these things, if we have these germ zapping robots, I wrote the article. It's back in 2014 when MRSA was out. There was a company in Massachusetts, or at least districts in Massachusetts. They were buying these robots called Gronks, Gornks. And anyway, think of this 3-foot tall, like R2D2 type robot. It's going around. They put in a classroom and it would like shoot these laser beams and other stuff. And then it would basically sanitize the classroom through this process, which is proprietary. I don't know exactly what it is, but you can find it online. These things were $100,000 a piece. The company that made them sold 350 just like that. Schools, nursing homes, gyms, things like that. Now, the fact is, those weren't necessarily any more effective than a custodian with a bottle of bleach and water mixed together going around and wiping things down. Because you're still going to have undersides of desk. You're still going to have a student that's going to come in from, being at home and being exposed to different people and stuff like that. And that room is going to instantly be contaminated again. And we do have immune systems, like we respond to stuff like this, but these are easy sells to districts who are panicking right now. If somebody comes in and says, listen, you should do this. Okay, let me move paranormal heart. Again, Kat, thanks for nice saying it's nice to see me live. Yeah, I haven't done this before. It's just, it would take too long to produce this and get it out. I want people who follow my work. I mean, it's a body of 120 podcasts that are at least an hour long with a blog post. So, that I've done my due diligence on this. Azuko Langley shut it down. So, Nick Schulander, we don't exactly have a good track record of predicting when the world's going to end, do we? So, yeah, right. I don't feel that way. Folks, I don't feel that some huge dire event is upon us, but I do feel that this way of how we're responding to it and what's being communicated doesn't match at all what a clear protocol from FEMA or how we've done things in the past, especially just going back to 9/11. It doesn't match up to any of that. Decisions are being made, super, super fast. And let's just think about Harvard shutting down and saying to students, you basically have a few days and then you have to get out. At least, that's what students are communicating who are going there in their tweets and social media. And this is just crazy. So Asuko Langley, okay, I'll go out and buy a vacuum this weekend. All right. Yeah. Vacuum. Maybe that was a missed endorsement for this show. Nick, I've got a bridge to sell those districts. Yeah. And Nick, Nick knows it well, marketing and also engineering, but as someone who's worked in marketing. But the thing is with marketing is this is happening so fast to districts that the marketers can't even really get in there and make their pitch and make their sell because the districts are already closing down, right? And a lot of these marketers are being told to work from home. So this isn't even the opportunity for marketers to come into schools on this was maybe 10 days and then it shut down. So that's something also that is, significantly going on. Um, Sean G, chasing the truth. Will closing national borders help the future spread of COVID-19? I mean, my opinion, right. So I would think if you're doing overseas flights from, Italy and things like that, it's kind of like how Hawaii approaches, incoming flights. You'd have to have some massive decontamination, or, flying into maybe a base or something like that. But I don't know. To me, if we're talking about closing borders, I think it would probably be air travel that you would look at closing down, because you also have people in a confined space for a long amount of time if it's international travel. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that. I think just before I came on the show, we start to see some airline companies come out and say that they were restricting flights. I would see countries like Japan jump on that right away, of saying, we're going to restrict this, which will slow, global commerce down to a crawl for a while, right? Okay, a paranormal heart. Those things look like Ghostbuster proton packs. Yeah, actually, you do. You look like a Ghostbuster if you're going around with these things, with these backpacks. And again, it makes the news. It's customer perceived value, and people want to get that. Nick, yeah, I work from home, so you're already ahead of the game on that, Nick. And actually, so what's happening right now is this also going to restructure when this settles out. Are we going to see a massive restructuring in how people work? Are we going to have, in the next 1 to 2, 3 years, people working more from home? Are we going to have universities shifting more at home? Is what happening right now, is that going to fundamentally shift these dynamics, permanently? Will we never return to, University of Wisconsin-Madison campus with 44 students on campus? That's very possible, that would change. Azuko, I have Remy Hallow induct air purifier that ionizes hydroperoxide, kills viruses as you sneeze and they come out of your mouth. So cool. So what you have, like, most people don't, right? And most schools, 99% of schools don't have anything outside of a paper filter that they're doing for their air filtration systems. And if we look at nursing homes and even hospitals, have very limited negative pressure areas, meaning that the air stays within that room. So yeah, you're definitely ahead of the game with that. But our large, places, even the post office, right? Places that we go to shop, they don't have this stuff in place. They're just not part of the building code. It's not designed that way. It can't be retrofitted that way, especially in the timeline that we're talking. We're talking about things that are developing literally within hours. For what happened in the last 72 hours, I would have expected that to unfold within 3 weeks, not 72 hours. So this is where, it's just mind blowing. Zuko Langley, or let me go back. Gallant Gallstone weapons. Zuko called my Springfield 1911 a grandpa weapon. It works fine. Time to get more modern with a 9mm of some sort, or old school is good enough to defend the realm. Well, certainly, the prepper mentality is going to increase. And I guess I don't know. I don't want to go too much down the road into that, but the prepper websites and buying things and storing things and having resources available. It's remember back in the 1960s, the house that I was raised in had a bomb shelter in the basement with 18-inch thick reinforced concrete and a blast door, and we had it stocked with goods because you never knew if the Soviet Union was going to attack. That was the mentality. Azuka Langley, we need robot workers so we can stay home and play video games. So yeah, that's probably actually not too far down the road. Nick Schuliner, well, I was saving this plan for the zombie apocalypse, but I guess virus outbreak is close enough. Yeah. This is really, again, really unprecedented area that we're in. Paranormal Heart, it was asked today on campus if the college could close down, if it should get worse here. That question seems to cause a lot of bit of stir in the class. Yeah. And actually, so Paranormal Heart, most students don't even have input into that discussion, right? They're being told it's shutting down. It's shutting down and you have so many days to be out, or it's shutting down. You need to go online. You're not driving in here. We're doing no more in-person classes. So I don't think it's a matter now of if, I think it's a matter of when. I think it'll be ubiquitous with all universities. It'll be ubiquitous, all K-12. It's customer perceived value, it's social proof. It wouldn't make any sense to close down a few and not close down the rest. And we've already seen this. I mean, again, who would think the NCAA men's basketball tournament would play in empty stadiums? Who would think the NBA would start playing in empty stadiums? So this is really upon us. And again, people are thinking, well, I'm going to go to my local Walmart, my local Costco. Who's going to be working those jobs when their kids are at home, or they're thinking, I'm not going to be working here because I don't want to be infected by people coming through the door? What protective measures are we going to encounter when we go to these settings? Are you going to have so much you'd be able to order ahead of time and you'd have almost a drop off where you pick it up? This is where National Guard comes into play in FEMA, and how all of these sites, like schools that are closed down, universities that are closed down, can rapidly become FEMA sites. When I say rapidly, when I participated in this, when I was in this as a school administrator, the site was taken over literally in 4 to 8 hours, meaning FEMA had everything on site. It was basically then under their jurisdiction in 4 to 8 hours, and they had that building. It was a really eerie feel. Now, I will say FEMA was tremendous to work with, but I'm saying this would rapidly scale. Nick Schulander, they never asked us anything before making the call. Yeah, they never, and they never do, right, Nick? But the thing is, they're not asking students right now, at least what I have been reading, they have not been asking students, how can we support you in a transition? If you can't be on campus and maybe you don't live here, you live out of country or in a different area, how can we get you home? How can we do things to support you? That's not happening at all. It is, we are closing on this date in good luck, which is absolutely counter productive for what any FEMA plan would have. That, if you are going to close, you lay out how you're going to close, you're supporting people through that closure. That's not what we're seeing. We are seeing decisions made and boom, you got to get the stuff out. The doors are going to be locked. You're going to have a login, password. That's it. Nick, the only thing they're doing is surveying to see how many people need to be loaned laptops. Yeah, I mean, right. And again, this whole thing of being educated online, it'll have more teeth at the post-secondary level. It's just not going to work effectively at a K-12 level. Not that it can't, not that the capacity isn't there. It's just that the curriculums have already been put in place for the year. You cannot take a class and simply convert it over to an online format. In like a matter of days and have that available. There's going to need to be massive concessions on a state level, massive concessions on a federal level. Students with disabilities, you're not providing IEP driven services. So it's just crazy. Okay. Any other questions here in the chat? I know that, we've also have a national presentation or coming up from our White House. So folks, I'm going to touch on a few things and I mean, please share these again. So I think what we're experiencing right now is happening at a pace I couldn't have predicted. Even under a scenario, if someone said, what would be the most extreme scenario, David, where you would predict that universities would close, K-12 would close, stores, other things, that we would have travel restrictions domestically. And I would say that would play out over a matter of weeks, and it happened in a matter of days. And now that it's started to happen, though, it makes it easier for the next decision to happen. It makes it easier to say, we're shutting down DMV. We're going to suspend postal. All of these things, which I think are completely on the table right now. I think all of these things are there. I wouldn't be surprised also if we see a stock market freeze, like after 9/11, where we have some days where the market doesn't open. And if we go back to the actual virus, we still just do not know. We just do not have clear information provided to us of exactly, how long this lives. For example, I went back early at the show, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Why in the world don't we have every postal carrier, our postal office, getting bottles of Perel through, whatever, government agency can get a hold of these and get them in our mailboxes, right? And you're just saying, hey, when your mail is delivered every week, on Monday, we are going to be putting that in a small bottle of Perel. Imagine the impact that would have. And that system is already in place, right? That system is already there to reach everybody. But it's the fact that we don't have this kind of thinking going on which is absolutely mind-boggling when we go to all these other extreme measures right now of basically shutting things down, isolating. It's just absolutely wild that we don't have this being distributed through existing distribution networks. Okay, heads up, you're closing in on the top of the hour. Thanks, Jim. Nick, they never asked us. Okay, the only thing they're doing is surveying to see how many. Okay, so what I'm going to do, folks, is to respectfully acknowledge your time. I'm going to close this after an hour. Let me just finish out the chat room. Azuko Langley, Israel has already developed a vaccine for COVID-19 that should be out in about 6 months. They're truly our greatest allies. So again, 6 months. So what do we do between now and 6 months, and who's presenting this to us? And how do you scale a vaccine? How do you prioritize a vaccine? What do you do between now and then? So this is folks, I am just go back to my first podcast if you had kids in school to kind of understand what's going on there. And, really be safe. The Johns Hopkins website information, I haven't seen the CDC update it as as frequently, but I'm absolutely just flabbergasted by the pace of what's happening right here. It's counterintuitive to how things work in emergency management. It's counterintuitive to what happened on 9/11 and how that temporary autonomous zone developed and how we handled that. This is completely different than that, and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, Nick, you also said the infrastructure to distribute a vaccine, right? That's where FEMA would come in, National Guard. Would we have school sites that we'd taken over? You'd be going into your school site to get a vaccine. Schools already have parking lots, they have bathrooms, they have lunch areas. I mean, that's why these things would all be in place. So, and Azuko says, I am eating beans for 6 months and playing video games. So yikes, that's good for a remote setting, not for a good in-person setting. Folks, please leave your comments down below. This is the first live stream I've done. I've done 120 episodes of the show, but it's the first live stream. It's just, it's important information. I couldn't wait to get this out. I hope this has been a benefit. If you could post down below. Also, if you're not following my show, if you could subscribe, I would appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I would like to do more live chats. We did have a fair turnout for this, considering this is the first one I did. And really, sincerely, I want all of you to be safe. Know your own priorities, know your own decision-making, because right now we just do not have any reliable national, international, or local decision-making that's being made. I don't think anything is off the table. I don't think anything is off the table right now, but you can, take care of yourself, take care of your family. So yeah, Nick, yeah, midterms. I don't know, man. I'm out of that. I am actually teaching a course right now, and fortunately, the course is online. But I'm going to be checking in with my students, many who are school administrators, on how this is impacting them. So yeah, Nick, thanks. Great show. I appreciate it. Down here in the North Star studio. Everybody, take care. Feel free to post down below. I'll respond to any questions that you have. Again, take care, everybody. This is Dr. David Perrodin, the Safety Doc. It is March 11th, 2020, 8:02 p.m. Chintz, thanks so much. Azuko, Paranormal Heart, Jim, Mallard, Nick. Just let me give a quick shout out here. Gallant Gallstone, Sean, Jeep. Just thanks for being part of the show, folks. And yeah, might hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate that, and hit the like. And take care. I might have another one of these coming to you very soon. Thank you, everybody.